So, ladies and gentlemen, we need to get into quite a few other things that I really want to do a bit of a deep dive on. So, initially, I'm going to get into my thoughts on the suits for Hawkgirl and Gardner. For those of you who missed my stream, I did like a 3-hour stream about it, but I've had a day or two to kind of let it digest, if you will. But not only that, we're going to put opinions aside in this video at a certain point and just get into why the suits have ties to Maxwell Lord's LordTech, and just how this links to other things that we've been talking about on the channel for quite a long time now, with regards to not only influences from Maxwell Lord's Justice League International, how this ties to the Reverse Kingdom Come theory, even the Terrifics, and even the Conglomerate, which is pretty interesting. And I know there's lots of people tossing around theories, so I'm gonna kind of go in a bit of a spew later on. So go ahead, like this video if you do go on to enjoy it. I'd greatly appreciate that. And hey, guys, you know, YouTube's telling me 47.9% of you who keep coming back to every video in the past month aren't subscribed. So are you one of the 47.9%? Maybe today is the day you subscribe for more videos like this. So we got our first look at the Hawkgirl and Gardner suits, and I know by now you've all seen these images for yourself, so the link to the images to cleveland.com I'm sure will be in the top pinned comment of the comment section. Also, shout out to the artists that I feature of their work in this video of Hawkgirl, Gardner, because I'm not gonna lie, when it's put into artwork the way you're gonna see it, it does come across a little bit cleaner than it does on the set photos. If you want the long story short on how I feel about the looks of the suits, my first impressions were such that, yeah, I'm not like a huge fan of them, if you know what I mean. I mean, I don't hate them by any means, like, not at all, but no way do I like them nearly as much as I would have liked to have liked them. And that's not me saying, and I really always want to stress this, that I had huge expectations, because that's something I actually always encourage on the channel to kind of keep in check, because, you know, otherwise, if you have massive expectations for something that was never really guaranteed to you to be according to your expectations, that can, of course, lead to disappointment. So no, I didn't expect layers upon layers of eloquently, or elegantly rather, weaved nth metal on Hawkgirl's suit or anything like that. But, you know, I also wouldn't have imagined the leather execution that we did get. Now, speaking of which, this does bring me to what's also interesting in how there's a bit of opinion war that I've seen go on between fans, or I guess you could call it a bit of a context war, if you will. So, for example here, something people are saying is, well, they're LordTech uniforms, so they're supposed to look this way, especially when, of course, you look at the influences from the comics that are going into this. So, in a bit of a response to that, from the other side, it's kind of like, well, okay, yeah, sure, I get what you're saying, but that doesn't mean that you have to like the design of the LordTech uniforms. So yes, if you're not keen on them or these looks for yourself, I do think you can just clap back and say, well, sure, they could have still made, you know, very intentional LordTech uniforms here that have a bit more sophistication in the design. I mean, regardless, this is totally subjective, but I think that's the point a lot of people are making who, you know, don't really vibe with the execution of these suits, which I have to say I do think is a perfectly valid point, because, you know, billionaire Maxwell Lord, you know, supplying the resources for these suits to be created, one could easily argue that there could be a more aesthetically advanced approach to creating LordTech uniforms, right? That transcends this simplistic leather texture to the suits. I do agree with both sides in how, yes, they're uniforms, they're reflecting and showing a mirror to the current corporate backing of superheroes in the DCU's landscape, if you will, and thus, through being corporate-sponsored heroes, the uniform is quite, maybe, bare bones-ish. And don't get me wrong, there's aspects of the suits that I do like. I actually think, maybe a bit of an unpopular opinion here, I do think Guy Gardner's bowl cut works. I mean, we expected him to have the bowl cut anyway. That's been teased for a long time from James Gunn. I didn't know if it was too serious, but I would say that was a minor expectation. It does kind of work more than what I thought it would, even though I know plenty of people are going to disagree with me here, because I know some people hate it. I do like Guy Gardner's Green Lantern logo on his shoulder pad and the belt. I appreciate the green trim in his motorcycle LordTech uniform, if you will. And obviously, Guy Gardner wearing a leather jacket isn't really a far cry from his usual suit design, even if it is done differently, as they're all members of this team that have an opening in the middle to display the LordTech logo. That's why I think that's been done. So that's why he doesn't have that closed flap jacket from the Guy Gardner usual look. As for Hawkgirl, I do think that the mace and the helmet is cool to fine-ish. I'm not mega impressed with it. Again, this is where I do want to say, like, I do agree with how, even though I think you can judge set photos in terms of design, it's like, okay, well, I can clearly see the execution they've gone for. I do think with a promo photo, maybe I would have a bit more of a sheen of that helmet. So I do think it's fine. I just don't think it's like, got an oomph for me. But at the same time, I think my issue with this is I don't think the material from her Hawkgirl helmet really blend into the leather suits that they're fitted with. I think if she had like shoulder pads that reflected the helmet, like the material, wrist guards, and maybe knee pads, it might have complemented it a bit better for me. Obviously, her wings would be CGI'd as we see her in a harness flying in. That's just a no-brainer. But ultimately, guys, with regards to my rant here about the suits, it is fine if you love these. It is. It really is. And, me, guys, I've had a lot of backlash in the comments, which is funny to say because, I'm entitled to my opinion, but I'll remain steadfast with my take that I do have an appreciation and a strong like for Corin Sweat's Superman suit and design. But I just feel like for me, the execution of these suits, even with the context in mind in the plot, are pretty, meh. I think it just comes down to the texture and materials of the suit. It works for me with Mr. Terrific because his suit uses materials like this in the comics, and this practically is his suit. So when we all saw that, the majority of us were like, damn, that is accurate. This looks like comic book accuracy at its best. But when you kind of translate that look over to Guy Gardner, which again is a bit weird for me to talk about because he does have a look with leather-ish kind of, I'm showing it on screen, his comic book look, but obviously it changes it up, but the context in mind is obviously the uniform approach here. But when you give that to Hawkgirl with that same execution, I'm just like, I don't even know what sound this is that I'm making, but I just don't. And of course, you could say to me that they're going to get their own individualized comic book suits as per, I guess, what you're seeing on screen right now. And I guess the question is, will it be within that of the same movie? I don't know about that. We will address that in the next part of this video. But anyway, why do they look this way, and why do they reflect Mr. Terrific's materials? So let's start at the beginning here. There's all kinds of theories and ideas out there, but if one thing is for sure, that is that these suits are from LordTech. There is absolutely no dispute about that anymore. We can see the logo displayed on the center of their chest under their leather jackets, and we know that's the LordTech logo because it has been advertised on shop windows. So obviously, Maxwell Lord himself is heavily involved with this, and he's being played by Sean Gunn. I don't know if we're actually going to see him in this movie. He could have a minor role, but I do expect his role to echo out throughout the first few years of the DCU at least, getting into even Booster Gold, which is why, by the way, I've got little thoughts in my mind of will these suits really end here? Maybe in this film, but maybe they could ripple out for a bit longer. But I wouldn't be surprised if, given that we have Mr. Terrific with the LordTech logo on his suit, that maybe he doesn't have his own kind of terrific tech company, if you will, and actually he could be, as I've mentioned before, Maxwell Lord's top R&D, engineer guy. He's the guy who uses Maxwell Lord's bankrolling to actually create the materials and other equipment for suits that we might see in the movie, whether that's the suits or even the jetpack backpack exoskeleton thing that he's using on set. Now, I keep seeing people label Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific one thing, such as, oh, you know, these suits mean that they're the Terrifics, or they are the Justice League International, or even uniquely the Conglomerate, when in reality, it's not any of those one things. You can't say they are the Terrifics. I mean, I guess you could say adaptations don't copy and paste, so they could call themselves one of these things, but I think it's really, in reality, more of a situation of how there's multiple inspirations being brought into one. Now, I've always just mainly and loosely said, okay, more of a Justice League International, a proto-Justice League International, something like that going on. Like, as soon as Maxwell Lord was cast, I was like, okay, they're going into this, roughly. Some kind of, group that is being formed by Maxwell Lord, because you see Guy Gardner, you see Metamorpho, all of these things were coming together. It's just now we're getting even more context that is helping put all of this together, even if we don't have a clear picture of all the puzzle pieces put in place. At least we have the puzzle pieces, as I like to say. So what I will say is, for example, Guy Gardner isn't a part of the Terrifics, nor is Hawkgirl, but you can evidently see here the very heavy white color scheme of these LordTech suits, to the point of where clearly they're borrowing that from the Terrifics, or the panels that you're seeing on screen from the Terrifics, especially if there's anything to Mr. Terrific being the one to actually design the LordTech suits on behalf of Maxwell Lord. And yet, obviously, there's inspirations from other formations, such as the Justice League International, given Maxwell Lord's involvement in the formation of that, and then, of course, with the Conglomerate, as that was literally a corporate-sponsored heroic team created by Claire Montgomery, who is actually the ex-wife of Maxwell Lord, out of competition to his Justice League International, of which at the time actually achieved a United Nations sponsorship. So you can really start to see, it's like, okay, well, maybe we won't get Claire Montgomery, and this is more of like a Conglomerate Justice League International proto kind of thing, / Terrifics kind of thing, molded into this new thing that Gunn is doing, thing. Let me expand on this even more. So, for example, with the Conglomerate inspiration here, they evidently wear, as you're seeing on screen, a bit more of a uniform. So it's like, all while they do have their own costume themes underneath, which I guess you could translate to how there's the trims of Hawkgirl's colors in Gunn's version of these suits, or that of Mr. Terrific's, or that of Guy Gardner's. What you can see in the comic version is a consistency with none other than a leathery jacket kind of look. So you can see that there is very much so an intent behind what we're seeing in Superman with Hawkgirl, Guy Gardner, and Mr. Terrific's looks, of which is, one of the things I can agree with regards to the discussion earlier, whether you like the execution of these suits or not. But then you have the white color scheme and black color scheme of the Terrifics team that Mr. Terrific has in the comics that you're seeing on screen, but then they have a little bit of their own colors. So, very much so examples of what Gunn is doing here through kind of doing a bit of a cocktail, even though I'm sure he will kind of call it one thing in the movie, even though in reality it's kind of a mix of several things. Now moving on to the next phase of this video. This is where my reverse Kingdom Come theory ties into these other influences that I've been discussing, because obviously, as Gunn says, in a world in where heroes exist and have existed for a very long time, many of them have probably become rough around the edges, perhaps lost the moral compass of their predecessors, such as, the Justice Society of America from World War II. So that's more of the reverse Kingdom Come side, and where there's like a world populated with heroes and villains, because we're already hitting the ground running. This isn't a Superman origin story. They are out there. They're all out there. I mean, Guy Gardner's already out there. Terrific's already out there. Hawkgirl's already out there. You get the picture. Superman is young in this version, rather than the world being kind of overrun with metas when he's older in that story. But also, the thing that's interesting is that many of them seem to be getting to the point of losing their individuality, if you will. You have heroes like this who are corporately sponsored by like Maxwell Lord's LordTech, which is fascinating, because then you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole that really kind of even, furthers the reverse Kingdom Come theory of how, like, it's such a different state of things with a world overrun by metahumans, of which has been used to them for decades and decades and decades. What does that kind of represent? Well, it can represent corporate-sponsored heroes. When you go down that rabbit hole, you then have maybe these sponsored teams that are maybe even likely pressured to take certain missions to get good press, but maybe they're not, deemed wholly heroic missions, of which maybe they really want to do. Perhaps some of these pressurized missions from their sponsor, the company, LordTech, Maxwell Lord, even really maybe the most ethical ones, and perhaps even characters like Superman wouldn't really agree with the mission that they've been sent on, or maybe the way they're going about it. So I'm not saying that they're not going to get along, because we actually see them getting along on set, collaborating together in videos like you're seeing on screen right now. Not a massive spoiler, but, it's just Superman landing in, Hawkgirl landing in, Guy Gardner and whatnot. But evidently they've been working together. But you do have to wonder if some of the tasks from the corporate sponsors may not be, again, deemed truly heroic at times. And honestly, that could be perhaps a bit of a revelation by the end of the movie, in which makes them disband and regain their individuality, inspired by Superman himself, who is nothing but a heroic, individual, unique hero in this world, and answering to no one other than himself and the people of Earth, where that's actually perhaps really not the norm anymore. And again, this springboards me to the next point. There's a lot of people who are out there from, government positions, company, corporate positions like Luthor and Maxwell Lord, to other powers that be, who really might not like Superman disrupting that status quo. Because imagine a world filled with, like, government-organized heroes. So you have Waller, who can control her Black Ops team, the Creature Commandos, to whatever else, right? You then have corporate-sponsored heroes, such as Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl. You then have perhaps other corporate heroes out there who are sponsored by Luthor Corp, possibly even that of the Engineer, before she maybe breaks off by the end of the movie to form her own group, the Authority. I kind of speculate that's what could happen there. And then you have this guy flying in red and blue being like, I'm gonna do things my way. Screw this. Why can't we do it like what the JSA did, like 8 years ago? They might not like that. They really might not like that, and I think that's what could be going on. Now, with that being said, though, I do want to add and stress that despite that, what Gunn has said about Maxwell Lord is that he's not exactly going to be evil. So one of the creators here for Maxwell Lord actually said in reply to James Gunn, he's flawed, and in the early stories, manipulated by a sentient AI. A bit of a con man, but, in the end, Max has a heart of gold and loves his team. But I'm sure you know that. And Gunn said, I like the nuanced Max for sure. The evil Max is in some good stories by some good writers and artists, but I always loved the character in the Justice League International for being multi-dimensional. Same way I loved Waller in Ostrander's squad. Two characters able to step out of the all good or all evil paradigm that was the de rigueur in those days, and still is actually. And then, here's another screenshot of him saying, calling Max a villain is a bit reductionist as far as I'm concerned. So that's my point. I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Gunn's Maxwell Lord genuinely, it's a bit of you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So I do expect him to be a bit of an opportunist, but I think he does actually like the good he's doing through funding Mr. Terrific to create LordTech suits and a team, and sponsoring a heroic team like this, but corporately. And as a bit of a side note here, I am still wondering if Stag Industries in this movie, if they've got their own thing going. Maybe a lot of companies do, as I already mentioned with Luthor, maybe enlisting the Engineer as well as other heroes to help aid him in this film. But with Stag Industries, this calls back to my idea of what I've always wondered. Like, yes, we know we're getting Superman's metahuman compatriots in this film, and we've seen them collaborate on set photos, but we haven't seen Metamorpho. And no, that guy in the blue wasn't Metamorpho. He was just kind of steadying Hawkgirl in the air and Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific, and then they just CGI him out, but he kind of holds on to them every now and again. So I have wondered if Rex Mason's Metamorpho, what if it is more of an origin in this film, maybe more of a response to what's going on from Stag Industries, and that's why by the end of this movie, if this team does splinter off a little bit from the corporate sponsored, origin that it has, maybe Mr. Terrific does officially create the Terrifics and helps Rex Mason come to terms with his powers. But it could also be totally possible, of course, that Metamorpho could already be an active hero on behalf of Stag Industries. But no matter what, I do think a big part of this story will be kind of the contrast with Superman and then all of these other kind of controlled, I say controlled, but in some way or another controlled, whether that's corporate backing and, maybe limitations of mission selection that they can have, heroes in that of the DC Universe's present day world. There's absolutely a status quo out there, and I do expect him to kind of incur the wrath of those who like that control through breaking the mold a little bit, and how perhaps seeing Superman do the things he does adds into this absolute and utter disdain that Lex Luthor has for Superman, which could maybe even lead to a framing of Superman because he's ruining what they have a bit of control over. If they manage to frame or make it look like Superman's done something bad in the public, this could reinforce to the public why having sponsored / regulated heroes like this is a good thing, rather than letting them run loose like this Superman. This is why, people of whatever, we should be doing it the way we've been doing it. I don't know. But that is all I wanted to get into in today's video. So let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. Let me know if you think we're kind of onto something, but if you've got any additions, I will be dying to read them. I love reading comment sections of videos like this and seeing what you guys have to expand on the theories. If you got this far, like this video. If you did enjoy it, consider subscribing for more nerdy breakdowns just like this, news roundups, and God knows what else, reviews and things. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, just really appreciate your time. Gotta love you and leave you. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.